rejoice and come in, and to rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in. Enter, and to rejoice and come in, and to rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in. And to rejoice and come in. And to rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Today will be a joyful day. Today will be a joyful day. And to rejoice and come in.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to our community church Unitarian Universalist. I am your minister, the Reverend Darcy Roque, and it is a joy to be with you virtually today. So who are we as community church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual path for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. We are so glad to have you virtually here today. And I also want to lift up that we are glad to have several members of our congregation here today. We have talked about our Tech Force 14. And so we not only has Amelia Earhart Lovelace become a part of our team, and Amy Earhart Lovelace, and of course, Cynthia Ramirez and Eric Reed, but today we also have Bill Fernandez and Sally Jackson joining us as part of our Tech Force team. So we invite actually anyone else who would be interested to please email us at minister@ccuunola.org if you would like to learn how, and it's getting easier and easier, to record services. I say this as well because we are learning. So there may be a hiccup again or two, but that is because actually as a community, we are going to be doing this work together. So it is us that is doing the recording and bringing this through to your homes. So we are so grateful to be here today with you. Also, in terms of the work that we are doing together, I want to lift up our Monday night sermon seminar. That will be starting on Monday, February 8th, I believe. Please, 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 if you are interested, email me at minister@ccuunola.org. It's partial caring circle and partial writing workshop. It is a way in these times to kind of think through some of what's happening and think through it spiritually, and then provide that for our community. I personally know several folks who have had a really wonderful time with this seminar, and also helped bring their sermons to the congregation as a whole. So please consider it, and we look forward to having you join us on February 8th. Also, speaking of things that we are asking for the communities, send us your Mardi Gras picture. No matter how absurd, in the best way, we would love for you to send us some Mardi Gras pictures, because what we'd like to do when we have our Mardi Gras service on Sunday, February 14th, which, right, it's going to look a little different this year, Cynthia. Normally, Cynthia does a beautiful Mystic Crew of CCUU parade. It's going to look different this year, but we'd also like to lift up our community that we're not going to be with together, but we will be there in spirit. So if you send us your Mardi Gras pictures from years past, we're going to be putting them in a beautiful slideshow that the community can see. So no matter how absurd, we want them. So thank you so very much. Finally, I want to lift up in particular our caring ministry. They've been doing some beautiful work, important work. If you'd like to continue to help support them, you can email caring@ccuunola.org. In particular, I want to lift up a member of our community, Russell Thames, who has, and he's given us permission to share this. His cancer has become metastatic, and so he would really love cards and phone calls at this time. And so you can email caring, CARING, at ccuunola.org, and we'll be able to send you his phone number and address. He loves you all. He misses you all. And though we cannot meet in person, I know very much that he would like a metaphorical hand reached out right now for his support. And with that, let us also reach our hand out for our chalice lighting today. So we are going to be listening to the beautiful dulcet tones of We Light This Flame.
We light this flame to affirm the light of truth and knowledge, the warmth of love and community, and the fire of hope and commitment.
Okay. Oh. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to read a story. Oh, let me get this thing off here. It's called The Boredom Monster. Ugh, I moan. Libraries are so boring. Shh, hum the whispers echoes. I roll my eyes. Mom says under her breath, "Will you be quiet for a minute? Find something interesting to read." I grab a random book off the shelf next to me. Something about the beginner's guide to physicalizing boring. I use it as a cover as I play on my phone, but within a minute, it dies. I chuck the book on the floor and lay back on the beanbag. Then I spot something on the roof. Somebody had graffiti "gullible" on the ceiling. I rolled over onto the floor, and the smell of sanitized carpet full of book dust. I am bored, so I licked it. It tastes extremely delicious, like fairy floss. So I drag my body across the floor, my butt in the air and my arms dragging by my sides, my tongue dangling and sliding across the carpet. And then I wake up with a mouthful of dust. It tastes like a bug brains and toenails mixed with dirt and dead centipedes. Ugh, I cried, and I claw at my dry tongue, and I run outside looking for the bathroom. I cannot see one anywhere, so I stick my head in the duck pond. Ew, even worse. It tastes like poo and rotten fish. So I simultaneously drag my teeth over my tongue and spit it out. What is happening to me? I grab a leaf and rub it against my swollen tongue. It was bleeding, and soon the leaf looked as if it was autumn already. I drop it in the pond, and a duck eats it. I watch the duck, but in a matter of seconds, it starts squawking like mad, and then it sinks, and it stops and sinks and drops to the bottom of the groggy pond. I gasp and I run inside. All the books are gone. No, wait, they're still there, but something's different. It is totally silent. I yell, "Mom!" And all the book book folks turn like zombies and shush me. Shh. It sounds like a whole ocean. I try to run out there, but then I spot my mom. I try to walk towards her, but I feel paralyzed. I try to scream, but I can't. It's the most terrifying thing, being unable to move. You feel utterly hopeless. I close my eyes and imagine I've crossed my fingers. Mom pushes through the crowd looking very cross. She reminds me of a pug dog. Where were you? I'm looking everywhere for you. Come on, it's time to go. I am utterly confused. Where was I? As my mom is dragging me out of the library, I spot a book on the floor. The Boredom Monster. Under the title, it says, A Hypnotic Adventure Begun by Boredom. Okay, so we're going to go on to Ubu Drum, which is a meditation by Matt Meyer.
Our first reading is from the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. For learning about wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for gaining instruction in wise dealing, righteousness, justice, and equity, to teach shrewdness to the simple, knowledge and prudence to the young. Let the wise also hear and gain in learning, and the discerning acquire skill. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction.
Thank you, Amy. As we do each week, this is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. So in this time, please bring whatever you have. As the hymn says, come, come, whoever you are, and bring all the joys that have bubbled up this week. Anything that brings you life and love. We know it's really getting into Mardi Gras season, and we know it looks very different this year. But what's bringing you joy in this time? And of course, too, this is a really important time for us as a community to lift up and share our sorrows. to know that we are not alone, even through our computer screens. And so in this time, I'm going to ask you to put your joys and your sorrows in the Zoom chat box. And we're going to be listening to, and I think it's very fitting for this time, That's Okay by Alex Pham.
Sometimes I go so slow, I feel I'm stuck. Sometimes I fall so low, I feel I'm stopped, and that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. Let's try it together. Sometimes I go so slow, I feel I'm stuck. Sometimes I fall so low, I feel I'm stopped, and that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. Sometimes I'm rising fast, I feel I'm flying. Sometimes I'm right on task, it's all aligning, and that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. 'Cause today is what it needs to be. Another day is coming soon, and I know that there is room. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay to be afraid. So when I feel so low and I am stopped, I just need to know I am who I am. These thoughts are not, and that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that's okay.
Thank you all for your joys and your sorrows. Jada writes that she's joyous that her daughter is turning 5 this week. Happy birthday. That's very joyous indeed. Mary writes of bon voyage to Alois as he returns to his home in Kenya, Africa. Safe travels. Alicia Cook writes, please send thoughts and healing energy, and we'll light a candle to the family of Robert Taylor, founder of Concerned Citizens of St. John, who is committed to fighting for clean air for his friends and neighbors. He and his wife are both in the hospital with COVID complications. We light a candle. Jim O'Neill writes about gratitude for the beauty of camellias. Beautiful indeed. John Davenport writes that Kathleen and him got their second dose of vaccination Friday. Congratulations. That is wonderful news. I am really heartened to hear of this continuing vaccination. Laura Carmen writes of gratitude for City Park and wonderful weather, for walks and cafe au lait and beignets. Absolutely. Carolyn and John and Mimi ask us to light a candle for Valda Smith. She appreciates our church praying for her. She's currently in hospice at her daughter's home and is not feeling well today. We light this candle of love and prayer for an amazing individual, Valda Smith. Thank you. Kat Vieira writes that some days I am so overwhelmed by the simple yet never-ending cycle of dishes, laundry, meals. It's a quiet, lonely feeling. We light this candle in feeling with you, Kat, for your sorrow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Howard writes, and Howard, this is another joy too. Howard had written at the beginning that he had a trouble getting in, but now he's in the meeting, which I want to lift up for the joys of technology and trying again and again and again, because Lord knows we do that here. So we're loving the full moon. It was beautiful. And the house floats that light up the neighboring street. The warm weather is bringing out the butterflies and bringing cheer. Lizzie Jenkins writes of shouting out that she survived the Moderna vaccine reaction, which all in all were minor compared to the infection. But she's warning everyone that there can be reactions. I would like to light a general candle before our larger candles. For a lot of folks in our community, as I mentioned, I'd like to light a candle for Russell. But also for generally members of our community who are some recovering from COVID, some recovering from surgery or illness not related to COVID, haven't been able to get into medical care as much. And also folks in our community who understandably have had some hard times with mental health, anxiety, and isolation. I want to light a candle for them because there's a lot of times that we're not always able to talk with each other and get to know what's really happening. And this is a very special time where we do that. And I just hope you know that we love you and that we are thinking of you. And now let us light 2 more candles. One for all the joys that are not yet spoken, that are coming out, just like the camellias and the butterflies and the house floats. We're starting to see beauty emerge. And also for all the sorrows that at the moment are too heavy to share. Please know in the joys and the sorrows, we love you and we hold you.
It's now time for our offering. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosity help us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at www.ccuunola.org/stewardship/ or by text at 504-370-2659. You could also send a check, my favorite way, at CCUU 6690 Florida Lee Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana 70124. All of this information is in the chat box if you didn't get that. Thank you for your support of CCUU. And now we'll listen to Find a Stillness.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
Our final reading today is from Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time, an excerpt. I'm not going to read the whole novel. There is no man, however wise, who has not at some period of his youth said things, or even lived in a way which was so unpleasant to him in later life that he would gladly, if he could, expunge it from his memory. But he shouldn't regret this entirely, because he cannot be certain that he has indeed become a wise man, so far as any of us can be wise, unless he has passed through all the unwholesome incarnations by which that ultimate stage must be reached. I know there are young people whose teachers have instilled in them a nobility of mind and moral refinement from the very beginning of their school days. They perhaps have nothing to retract when they look upon their lives. They can, if they choose, publish a signed account of everything that they ever said or done. But they are poor creatures, feeble descendants of doctrinaires, and their wisdom is negative and sterile. We cannot be taught wisdom. We have to discover it for ourselves by a journey which no one can undertake for us, an effort by which no one can spare us. So as I speak these words at the pulpit, standing upright in my dignified robes, time is collapsing a little bit. And suddenly, I'm writing these words earlier this week in bed, in the middle of the day, in my pajamas. During this pandemic time and long after, I reject your ergonomic desks and flowcharts for work productivity. My sermons happen in bed. This bed-ridden creative impulse and time collapsing upon itself are just two pieces of wisdom that I have gleaned from In Search of Lost Time, a book written by Marcel Proust from a semi-recumbent position suspended midway between the realms of sleeping and waking, i.e., lying in bed. This is a 7-volume recollection of a narrator living in aristocratic France in the 19th and 20th century, totaling 4,215 pages. That's over 1.25 million words, written by a man who some say was ill, others say a hypochondriac, and who described himself as suspended between caffeine, aspirin, asthma, angina pectoris, and altogether between life and death, every 6 days out of 7. A man who read train schedules for fun, went to ostentatious parties but complained about them constantly, wore a giant fur coat no matter the weather, had some serious mother issues, and felt himself altogether unfit for public consumption. I think Proust would have fit in perfectly in New Orleans. Now, here we are in month 10 of coronavirus isolation. Am I recommending that you read In Search of Lost Time in some crazed existential life hack? No. But if I've done my job, you need not read this epic tome to get something out of today. And a confession, I haven't read the whole thing. But I have read the French philosopher Alain de Botton's How Proust Can Change Your Life. And with his musings, as well as the wisdom of Solomon, legal ethicist Martha Nussbaum, and Mardi Gras revelers, I hope we can begin to consider what it means to take our time, spiritually and emotionally, in this unprecedented time. So a friend of Proust, after reading the first chapter of his novel, wrote, "My dear friend, I may be dense, but I fail to see why a chap needs 30 pages to describe how he tosses and turns in bed before falling asleep." Additional commentary from friends was equally severe. But that is Proust's way. He takes his time. He observes in ways in which you and I cannot, or more aptly probably do not want to, pitched with a slower and deeper emotional frequency. In Search of Lost Time's protagonist eats a Madeleine, which brings him down a rabbit hole of memory. It is a long passage, because in biting into that tiny cake, our protagonist recalls his childhood, how he would dip the Madeleine into lime-flavored tea, of his aunt and his mother, of the small village that he roamed, of innocence and wonder and melancholy. When I'm at this pulpit, if I give myself the time, I can reflect on the myriad of times I have been here. 2019, looking out at a full congregation of folks, fuses with 2021, looking at the camera and the 7 gathered here today. A very different, beloved community. And I begin to feel the range of emotions that these fused memories bring together. Melancholy at what has changed. Gratitude for the ways in which we have adapted. Hopefulness that we will soon be together again. So in just a couple of weeks, I think you all know that we're going to be celebrating Mardi Gras in New Orleans, a holy day if I ever knew one. It will, by virtue of this very specific time, be far different than any other Mardi Gras we have ever experienced. Many of us may be rushing too quickly to ignore this fact, wildly decorating our homes as part of the crew of house floats, or vowing to stay inside and pout into Mardi Gras 2022, or most worrisome of all, pretending that nothing has changed and finding some crowd to jump into. But what if we take our time before Mardi Gras Day to remember Mardi Gras of years past, looking through old pictures, and then send them to us by February 3rd, open up a king cake, taste and smell it, turn on some Rebirth brass band, and recollect as time folds in on itself. Do you remember Mardi Gras 2016? Or more poignantly, do you remember Mardi Gras 2006? Mardi Gras itself steps out of time in this world to make a ritual of revelry. And so let us take our time and be prepared for the flood of emotions that a changed Mardi Gras will bring. In a couple of weeks, we're also going to take our time in worship to both celebrate this joyous season and mourn the loss of so many New Orleanians, particularly our culture bearers, to COVID-19. Have we taken enough time? And I ask you in general, in this time where actually all we seem to have is time, when did you last take your time with anything? When did a smell, a noise, a taste evoke something far greater than the moment you're in? Did you stop to be amazed? Did you take your time even when the memory was painful? Or did you, do we all, distract ourselves with the next internet feed to scroll through, numbing our brains because I get it, we're in a pandemic. And that may seem easier than facing not only the present, but the past too, and the fears about the future. Now, sometimes we do need to just get through something physically before we have capacity to emotionally or spiritually reckon with it. An illness, for example. But we're in month 10 of the pandemic. And by now, for most of us, some form of acedia has set in. Acedia, one of the great lost words in the English language. So it was originally used to describe the plights of 5th century monks. The word acedia, as Australian Catholic University research fellow Jonathan Zaker wrote, arose directly out of the spatial and social constrictions that a solitary monastic life necessitates. These conditions generate a strange combination of listlessness, undirected anxiety, and inability to concentrate. Together, these make up the paradoxical emotion of acedia. It was called the noonday demon. This word fell out of secular favor years back, until, you guessed it, the year 2020, when many of us were made accidental monastics, without many of the spiritual tools to be prepared for such isolation, such acedia. But taking our time, paying attention to this moment and the moments that came before, being present, are the spiritual tools needed for this time. And I know this spiritual work isn't comfortable. I don't always like it. And sometimes, like reading Proust, may seem interminable. But by taking our time now, we are preparing for the time when this pandemic will be over. When we take the time to start to process what we're feeling, what we're thinking, our trauma, when we have perhaps processed enough of the trauma that has come at many of us over the last year, when this pandemic is over, we may be able, at least in some small way, to move forward again. And if we're lucky, we might move forward with a little more clarity, a little more knowledge, and hopefully a little more care for ourselves. Because listen, in general, eating a Madeleine isn't that special. Even listening to a Dr. John song all on a Mardi Gras day may not be that special. But Proust challenges us to think of these moments as always charged with feeling and memory. Moments that are not created for us, but instead we shape through experience. And when we shape them individually, we start to recognize just how much of an infinite mystery we, and thus, by extension, other people are. Ironically, though, the very act of writing about individual experiences, as Proust did, also can help us empathize, understand, and share the feelings of others. It allows, for example, in a fiction story, the reader into a character's life that may be radically different than our own. And when done well, we say, aha, I feel this in some small way too. I know that in some small way too. For those of you who love music or visual art, that feeling also can be that connector. And further still, the legal scholar Martha Nussbaum, in her work Poetic Justice, she argues that the act of entering, for example, into another character's perspective, learning about them and seeing their world, if only for a moment, can actually change the way we act, not only individually, but as a community, with greater justice and greater care. So, for example, if we take our time to get to know a character between the pages of a book, particularly one that is different than us, then when we look up for that book, perhaps we will take our time with the human beings right in front of us, in our homes, or more frequently these days, on Zoom. And yes, even on Zoom, we can take our time. I think of our time of joys and sorrows in this worship, where we share our triumphs and tribulations each week together. Vulnerability tapped out on keyboards, connections made on screens. And I hope through all of this vulnerability and empathy helps us recognize that we need greater care for ourselves. We are all massive, unfinished manuscripts, a work in progress far longer than 1.25 million words. If we are to one day come back together again, to work together, to worship together, to live in this world together, we must recognize that most, nay, all of us would never be able to publish, or these days post online, as the fictional painter Alistair noted in our passage today, a signed account of everything we have ever said or done of which we could be proud. If we recognize that even now, our pain, our embarrassment, and yes, even our acedia have formed us as much, if not more, than our happiness and accomplishments, then maybe we can venture back into life with a little more clarity for ourselves, and perhaps a little more grace and empathy for others. Proust suffered greatly in his life. Whether it was from anxiety or real physical ailment, it hardly matters. And he believed that that made him a better artist, more attuned to the world. As Proust wrote, happiness is beneficial for the body, but it is grief that develops the powers of the mind. Or even more bluntly, everything great in the world is done by neurotics. They alone founded our religions and created our masterpieces. Now, Proust would want me to be discerning with his writing, and so I'm going to tell you that I don't believe grief is all that will move us to some greater understanding. However, I do believe that we must be attuned to all our experiences, painful and joyful, and actively take our time with them. And in taking this time, we can shape how these experiences affect us, help us grow wiser and more empathetic, rather than having them shape us without reflection or thought into frightened or apathetic or thoughtless characters in our own life story. As Alistair again notes in our reading, we cannot be taught wisdom. We have to discover it by ourselves, by a journey which no one can undertake for us, an effort which no one can spare us. But to read into empathy in our books and the books of our lives, we must bring our lens of discernment. We must take our time. Proust has much to say that resonates with me, but his very specific, very bitter views on love that he casts as universal doesn't resonate. That does not mean that we cast aside any opinion different than our own. It means that we more deeply engage with what we read, what we hear, what we experience, and consider taking our time. Does this resonate in my head and my heart? Does it challenge me? Is it truthful, even if it's not my truth? Before we embrace something as pure fact or embrace it as pure fiction, certainly before we decide to share it online with our friends, family, and frenemies, may we have some discernment. May we take our time. I have my own confession. In our readings today of Proverbs 1, I came this close to taking out the fear of the Lord is the beginning, first Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It doesn't fit with my theology. But with that edit, I'm taking away discernment from you. The right to decide for yourself what in the text resonates, what makes you recoil, what stays with you. And again, our now beloved Proust says it best about his role as an author and our role as readers. We feel very strongly that our own wisdom begins where that of the author leaves off. And we would like him to provide us with answers when all he is able to do is provide us with desires. Reading is on the threshold of spiritual life. It cannot introduce us to it. It does not constitute it. I liken that sentiment to our role as Unitarian Universalists. We recognize as a people of faith that we so often stand on the threshold of spiritual life. And in taking our time, in caring for each other, in ritual and worship each week, in justice work, we may occasionally pass through that threshold. We pick up and use the spiritual tools that help us survive and occasionally thrive, even in the throes of acedia. Speaking of acedia, as this sermon comes to a close, I think I'll go, metaphorically, back to bed for one more lesson. Thanks to the wonders of the internet, it's not all bad. I promise this isn't an old man yells at cloud sermon. I found that I was not alone. Many folks have stayed in their beds to work from time immemorial, from artists to chronically ill or disabled people to both. And so taking my time in my individual experience, I found a deeper place of empathy and of action when this pandemic is over. As we slowly return to normal life post-pandemic, I hope to keep forefront in my mind that productivity and creativity look different for different people. Can we as a church help find a seat at the table, or a recline in the bed, or a view from the computer screen in this church and far beyond these church walls for more folks whose perspectives are needed, whose abilities may be different than our own? I think we can. If we take our time. It will take time, but we can do it. So as we take our time with our memories, with art and other people, with world events, and those small, beautiful moments we hold close, from Mardi Gras Day to eating a macaroon to mourning what has been lost, may we be blessed in all these things. And may we know that in this, we are truly alive. Amen. Our benediction today is from Mary Oliver. Please bring these into your week to come and perhaps the month of February. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. May you go forth in peace and love, and we will be moving into our coffee hour with continued conversation. We love you, and until we see you again next week, go in peace.